Great. Well, thanks, Kevin and Ron. Appreciate it. Very happy to be here. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're talking about the secret world of hiring managers and recruiters. My name is Ian Alexander. I'm co-founder of Survale and chief marketing officer, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jason Moreau, who's also the co-founder of Survale and CEO. Jason, welcome.
Hi guys. Hi Kevin. Hi Ian. It's great to see you guys.
So today we're talking about the secret world of hiring managers and recruiters. But before we get into that, I just want to give you a little pitch for Survale. Survale is the research platform for the Talent Board and the Candy Awards. So the Talent Board uses the Survale platform to gather feedback from candidates, from companies that participate in the Candy Awards. And they also communicate the results of it through Survale. It's a light version of Survale. Survale is an enterprise product that's really designed to gather feedback from your candidates, your employees, and also your hiring managers and recruiters, which we're going to talk about today, in real time. And it's all triggered by your ATS. So it all runs in the background. You get these great analytics and you're able to analyze and optimize your whole hiring process using that feedback. And we'll touch on that a little bit in the presentation. But really, I don't know about you, Jason, but when we started this company a while back, one of the surprising things to me, although we knew it was a use case, was just how many of our clients, one of the first things they want to do is they want to gather feedback from their hiring managers about their recruiters, and their recruiters about their hiring managers, and use that sort of in the management of their department. It was the same situation for you. A little bit surprised at just how much that use case is used.
Yeah, and it was primarily the managers getting feedback on the recruiter. They wanted to really understand, basically getting feedback around, are we seeing enough quality, enough quantity? And then recently we've started to see another question inserted into that process where, are we seeing enough diversity, which is a really big topic right now. And it's a whole another candidate pool that companies are starting to look at, and it opens up a lot of doors. So.
Right. So sort of for our agenda, we want to talk about that phenomenon and kind of show you what other employers are doing and how they're using not only candidate feedback, but hiring manager and recruiter feedback to sort of manage the whole process, right? So the agenda here, we're going to talk about sort of typically what people are used to using candidate feedback for, and why. And we're going to talk about sort of recruiter hiring manager alignment that can come from a different kind of approach or an augmented approach. How to structure recruiter hiring manager feedback and how to use it in your sort of everyday management of your recruiting teams. The benefits, what our clients see, and we're even going to talk about a few case studies of how people are using it, kind of what they've seen in terms of the benefit of that recruiter hiring manager feedback, and then of course, questions. So when we talk about typical candidate feedback, and Jason, jump in if we're missing any here, it's great for providing those key performance indicators for hiring effectiveness, right? I think that the jury on how does candidate experience positively affect hiring results, that's settled science at this point. But really, if it is, and if increased candidate satisfaction is helping you hire better, it's really great to have KPIs that you can get from candidate feedback to really track, are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Do we have problems, et cetera? And that kind of comes to the next use for candidate feedback, because it really is great for uncovering problems with whether it's your people, whether it's your technology, your processes. It's really great for your candidates telling you, hey, look, there was a problem here. This application was difficult. This assessment process was confusing. This interview was not pleasing. It increases the value of. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
So yeah, there's one other one, Ian, I can add there is looking for adverse impact in the hiring process is also through the feedback of a candidate. It's such a great way to kind of discover, are we treating certain populations of our candidates differently? And this is one way to help identify that.
Yep. And then when it comes to the brand, you know, you spend a lot of time on your employer brand. You develop your messaging. You do research to find out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what you want to amplify, what you think is gonna land with your candidates and your employees, for that matter. And so that feedback is great to kind of find where there might be disconnects between what you're providing and what you're amplifying and what candidates are expecting. And we can all think back to over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of change in expectations from candidates. So being able to get that feedback regularly really helps you uncover these, and just asking, hey, how's it going? Or asking, are we your first choice as an employer? That really goes a long way to building your brand as well, because you're having those conversations with candidates, and they appreciate that.
And Ian, sorry, one more on that employer brand topic is, there is studies out there that connect a poor brand to having to pay an increase in salary to attract people to hire. So, and on average, you have to pay about a 10% increase in annual salary if you have a poor brand. So hence the importance of understanding it.
For sure. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later in some case study discussions.
Oh, did I just pull the wind out of your sail?
Yes, thanks, man.
Sorry.
It also identifies best practices. What are you doing right? It's not all about negative stuff. It's about what are we doing well, and how can we build on that? How can we propagate that throughout all of our recruiters, all of our hiring managers, all of our stakeholders? And then again, it aligns recruiting stakeholders around common metrics. And that's what we're going to focus on today. We're getting feedback from, as you'll see, from varied constituents to really understand, really align people around the same kind of metrics. And so that's what we're going to talk about here, which is that alignment, right? So we talk about candidate feedback. It's great for identifying problems in interactions between hiring managers and candidates, right? So if you think about how we're going to evaluate various stakeholders in the recruiting process, one of the big ones is hiring managers. And who has a lot of contact with hiring managers? That's interviewees. That's the candidates that get interviewed. So that's a great source of intelligence to gather feedback, to then create sort of candidate net promoter scores for your hiring managers based on how they're treating the candidates. That's one measure of performance that's really important. And here's an example of sort of some of the feedback that you might get back from a hiring manager after an interview. Jason, I know you talk to a lot of clients. I'm sure. Yeah. What are the ones that you see the most here when it comes to interviews?
There's one question that really stands out, which is, did the interviewer make good use of your time? And I think that's by default in our templates for our clients. But that question there has one of the largest impacts on a candidate's experience at that interview stage. Is often they feel as though their time was not valued or wasted. These candidates are typically taking half day off, full day, sometimes there's travel involved. So they're putting that stuff out there, and when you waste their time, it definitely has a big negative impact.
For sure. And it's a black box, right? I mean, as a recruiter, you don't really know. You don't hear about things unless they go really bad with a hiring manager. And it's one of the most important touch points in the whole candidate experience process. So candidate feedback also is good for identifying problems and interactions between candidates and the recruiting team, right? And there's an interview portion to that, like phone screens, right? You get that feedback on phone screens, but also scheduling issues. You don't know, responsiveness issues, issues around, as we said, people, processes, and technology are going to show up, and the recruiter is typically your main point of contact. So it's great to establish that net promoter score for each of your recruiters by gathering that candidate feedback. Now, we go one step further. This is where we start hiring managers and recruiters starting to talk to each other and starting to give feedback to each other about the service levels and the results, right? So The hiring manager feedback is great for identifying those kinds of service gaps that happen. You know, am I getting enough candidates? Are they right quality? Is my recruiter really understanding what this role is? Am I getting timely responses so we can hire that candidate that I really want to hire, but I know they're getting multiple offers, et cetera. So that's where we start doing that internal feedback, and it can all be combined together, and we'll talk about that as we go on. But here, one of the great things as we show here is when you do have those service gaps or those issues that come up, you find out about them in the hard metrics. You know, you've got a negative score, but you can easily then just dive into the comments, and you can see, hey, I only received one candidate for this role, and it was somebody who had already accepted a job offer at another company, and or, you know, hey, this recruiter is great, but I wish they could get back to me a little bit more quickly. This is a problem. So you can go in there and have those discussions with recruiters, et cetera. So that's another source of alignment. So to kind of visualize what I'm talking about here is you've got three legs of the stool here, right? You've got recruiters rating hiring managers and hiring managers rating recruiters, and you've got candidates rating recruiters and hiring managers, and those are all coming together, which we'll show you here in just a second as we get into how to structure all this. And again, when you think about your hiring teams, there's a lot of people that don't report to the recruiting, and a lot of processes and technologies that aren't directly, you know, managed by the recruiting team that are stakeholders in this process. So if you visualize this, you can see on the left, you've got your recruiter metrics, or let's start at the top. All right, you've got an overall NPS for your recruiting process, right? But within that process, you've got hiring manager satisfaction for your recruiters to measure. You've got candidate satisfaction for your recruiters and their phone interviews that you can track. On the hiring manager side, you've got business interviews, on-site interview NPS, and you've got recruiter satisfaction NPS. How's the recruiter been working with this particular hiring manager? So you can see where that alignment comes from, and we'll talk about structure here now, because now I know many people are saying, well, how do we do this? This is like, we can't be sending out 1 million surveys and everybody's surveying everybody. Trust us, it works. So when we talk about structure, kind of start from the top of the pyramid or bottom of the pyramid and work up. Sort of the baseline here is establishing some high level common metrics. And the way that we recommend, and most of our clients do, is to set up those moments of truth in your hiring process, those key interactions. So what I'm showing you here is, you know, you've got a recruiter interview, a phone screen NPS, you've got a business interview NPS, you've got offer NPS, offer declined NPS. Now there's other checkpoints within your recruiting process that you can choose to monitor, but this is a nice tight, you know, tight 5 things to measure. So you start there, and as you go through there, you can kind of see, well, look at on-site business interviews, or, you know, we got a 58 and a 57 in the first couple. Our overall is a 58, and then our first step in the process is a 57. Then we drop down to a less than a 52. I wonder what's in there. Imagine being able to click in there and be able to see all that data from candidates and from recruiters that are saying, this is what's happening in our business interviews, and you can mine that data. So as we move along, there's also that internal feedback now in terms of all this feedback being gathered. This is something that's best left for after the rec closes, right? So, you know, typically it'll be at the offer accepted stage or at the hired stage. You know, we'll trigger a feedback request to the recruiter, trigger one to the hiring manager, and that gets all digested into our KPIs, which we're going to see here fairly shortly. And so here's an example of how that all kind of coalesces together now. This is a typical feedback dashboard from using Survale. You can do this with any sort of platform for gathering feedback. We think we've designed ours for this purpose. So it's really easy, and you really don't, once it's set up, it's set it and forget it, but you don't have to do anything special here. You can do this with regular surveys and tenacity. So typically you would have an overall candidate experience dashboard that would kind of show you what your candidates are saying about each of the stages, and you can look at comments, et cetera. But if you look at this particular screen, this is set up with that, with their candidate experience view along the left-hand nav bar. But you also see a TA leadership view, which is where you can look at all of your particular recruiting managers and their teams together. So in this instance, we've got Yves Vela, who is a recruiting manager. And as we go through, we've got an overall NPS for his department, for his team, his recruiters, right? So we see that as a 58. And then we see the overall recruiter satisfaction rating. This could be just from hiring managers. This could be from hiring managers and candidates. It could be just from candidates. It can be set up any way that you want it. But you sort of got an overall sort of recruiter satisfaction. So instantly as a manager, I've got what I kind of need to know here about how my team's performing. And then as you go through the various tables here, you've got your team satisfaction rating. So here's all my recruiters from Nilima to Ian to Jason, and they're doing great. We can see their month by month performance. And this, again, is feedback from hiring managers to the recruiter in this particular instance. You can also see your team's business NPS. So in this case, it's been broken down by the business units that they serve. So I can look at how my team is serving the engineering department in terms of filling their roles, the sales department in terms of filling their roles. So if there's some problems, like if you look at corporate there, we've got a negative 100, you can drill into it. Imagine being able to drill in there and say, what's going on there? And it also allows you to kind of see, are we having problems serving certain business functions versus other business functions? Which is an interesting way to go about it. And great, you can configure these pretty much any way that you want and look at it by a number of different dimensions. Then you have your team's net promoter score. So your overall, would your candidates recommend your team members? And that's broken down also by business unit in this particular example. But also as you go down towards the bottom, your team, you can see your team's hiring managers. So all the hiring managers that have gotten feedback or given feedback within your team's sphere of influence are shown here. So you can also see what's going on in terms of alignment with the team and in terms of how the hiring managers are performing. So this is a great screen for kind of showing how you can kind of put everything in one place in terms of each manager and understand kind of what's going on at a glance. Behind this, you've got all the survey data that backs it up that you can drill into and find more about.
Hey, Ian, I have a little comment. What I've seen with some of the client base now is they're taking this and they're using it, but they're also now tying it to recruiter performance. So part of annual reviews is they'll take the feedback that they've gathered from third-party candidates or managers and incorporate that into their annual review. Then that also turns into some of the compensation and bonuses and so forth. So it's being used in many different ways, not just for a brand anymore.
Yep, exactly. And that's exactly what we're leading to. Structuring recruiter and hiring manager feedback. So in terms of how this is structured, the benefit of this is using this approach. It allows you to be able to understand not only your own team, but the stakeholders, hiring managers within your team's sphere of influence, and answer some questions in real time. Like, are the recruiters responsive to the hiring manager needs? Are they understanding the business requirements that the hiring managers have? Are they providing enough quality candidates? Are they providing enough diversity in those candidate pools? Jason, you mentioned this up front. It's very easy to stratify this information that you see on your dashboard by EEO status. So, male versus female, people of color versus Caucasian. You can stratify it any way that you want. So you can kind of have intelligence about that, but also you can monitor that feedback from hiring managers and saying, hey, I'm getting not very diverse candidate pools. It's another data point that you can use to kind of manage those important things that you're trying to manage while your hair's on fire and you're trying to recruit. Are the recruiters communicating effectively with the candidates? Are the hiring managers properly representing the employer brand? Are they knowledgeable about the candidates? Are candidates showing up and the hiring manager's like, I don't have your resume, and what's your name again? It's important. And also, are they being respected in interviews? It's just as to your question or your comment about questions earlier. And at the bottom, Jason, and at the bottom, you can see, behind each one of those questions are those comments from candidates that you can drill in. And you don't have to guess. Hey, I know that my hiring managers are rating my recruiters low on their responsiveness, but how does that look? What does that look like? You drill into the comments, and you can find out exactly not only what does that look like, but who's doing it. So really supports that along the way. And so as we talk more about benefits, we talked about alignment. It aligns stakeholders and answers crucial questions in real time. But it reduces the time to fill. Jason, I know you hear this all the time. You've got multiple offers per candidate.
Yeah.
You're trying to time to fill is an important metric right now, correct?
It certainly is. I mean, we hear it all, like you said, hear it all the time. It's you're fighting for a candidate that fits the position, the role, skills. They've also got 4 other offers, let alone a counter offer coming from their current employer. You've got to put your best foot forward in this kind of environment, and this environment is here to stay. So, there's offers coming from everywhere.
Right. And so again, that comes back to that real-time feedback and that sort of programmatized feedback. Bake candidate satisfaction into your processes, and then things like time to fill become things you can react to very quickly. You don't have to wait till your quarterly candidate survey that you send out, or your annual candidate survey that you send out. Those are all great, but this is about using feedback to manage your department, to manage your results in recruiting. And this has happened in customer service. It's very much a part of customer service. And this is really taking that model and putting it into the service that you give to candidates and the service that you're giving to your hiring managers and the rest of your organization.
Hey, can I just touch on that point about, the real time at the stages and so forth? Because it's so important. There's 2 ways. I mean, Survales can tackle this way either way. So we can either, gather feedback after an event, like an interview, a phone screen that has happened at that stage. And then you can also wait till end the process and gather that feedback. And I get asked the question a lot, which one should we choose? And the traditional way has been wait till end of process. That's just because, often that's the only way they can do it. Now we have this new environment and world where we can go in real-time pulse at the stages that we're talking about and diagnose. So the question often comes back to me and people are asking, well, aren't you just going to get more positive feedback or more of a positive bias? True, you could probably get some positive bias, but the same is said for end of process. When you've dispositioned people, is that your bias is more negative. Like, what we're trying to do by doing real-time surveying is find those negative instances and as soon as possible be able to act on them, because those negative instances are happening right now. You need to be acting on it. You can't afford to wait for 60 days when you've dispositioned that role to find out, oh, we had that happen. Like, you need to be able to jump on it now. So that's the importance and the 2 factors that are going on here. Of course, Survale can operate either way, but we recommend best practice in the real-time environment.
Yeah, and I'm writing an article on it right now, so it's very top of mind for me. There's a lot of misinformation.
Yourselves again.
But no, I mean, I'm agreeing with you that this whole dichotomy of end of process, real time, it really doesn't make any sense when you boil it down, because if you're gathering real time feedback, you're getting people who were end of process right after the application, right? Because they've answered a knockout question, and that was end of process for them. So they're getting feedback in real time, and then you're getting candidates that are really engaged. Maybe I'm in a phone screen. I get feedback after the phone screen. I'm very engaged. I wanna work with you. I want the job. I want to give you all the information I can give you. Plus, I remember it, right? So you're getting, when you do real time, you're actually getting, end of process and real time at the same time.
Yeah.
And you're getting it right as the candidate has experienced it. So if that rejected candidate at any process has a negative comment, yeah, that might be negatively biased, but you want to hear that comment because they're going to tell you the truth about what's really happening in your hiring process.
And I'll tell you, Ian, what else we see is, to talk about that point a little bit more, is that when a candidate has a negative experience, they've checked out of your brand. They're no longer wanting to work for you. So they're going to tell you and they're gone. So you can't have that again, especially if you've got a good. That's why you want to do this real time. You need to find out right away. All right, maybe there's a little more positive bias here and there. But you know what? It's more important for me to find out that negative experience and hear about it, so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and at least you've asked them right after the negative, instead of waiting 60 days and then all of a sudden candidate gets an email, a survey out of the blue, and they're angry and they're like, they don't remember, except that they don't like your brand and they're not going to respond. So you don't get as much data. There's no upside to waiting to the end, except, as I said before, recruiter, hiring manager, feedback, wait till the end.
Right.
Different case. Oh, actually, I haven't finished that slide. So it reduces the time to fill, which is hugely important right now. And that alignment that we're talking about here really speeds that time to fill, because your team's working together and they understand what they're being measured on. It reduces the cost per hire. Jason, you talked about it earlier. Organizations with a poor employer brand tend to pay 10% more in salaries. And bad experiences end up on social media and on employer review sites, further depressing your employer brand. So again, end of process versus real time is very important. It provides better oversight. I doubt that many organizations outside the ones that we're talking about are really monitoring those hiring process in real time, and they can see exactly what's happening across all that sort of distributed process. And again, as I said before, those candidate experience KPIs get fully baked into the hiring process. It's not like hey, let's do a survey or let's analyze what candidate. No, this is a part of what we measure ourselves on. And those common metrics, they align those hiring managers and recruiters. When hiring managers know they're being evaluated by candidates and recruiters know the same thing, they're accountable, and you get much more accountability and much more engagement. And again, as we talked about before, you can correct things in real time. You can use all those metrics to make changes, not 6 months later, but in real time. Even restructuring a department, which we have some case studies that talks about learning about what's really going on in the recruiting department, and then doing some restructuring, not downsizing, restructuring. And it forms the basis for incentives and performance management, as Jason, you said before. It's really, when review time comes around and when bonus time comes around, this data is used very, very heavily, and it's very important. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about client results. This is one organization. They were able to sort of realign their recruiters to better serve specific functions in their businesses versus more generally across a lot of functions. They were being very transactional in terms of how they were distributing jobs to recruiters to work with hiring managers on. And they saw the feedback they were getting. And one of the changes they made early on was, look, let's restructure and let's do more of an account management style of interface between us, so that we can have recruiters specialize in business units and be working with the same hiring managers in the same kinds of jobs. And that made sense for them given their structure, their size, and their ability. They were also able to really understand what's going on with those external hiring managers that are outside of their purview, and finding out things like, hey, we want cameras on during interviews in this age of remote interviews. And we can see feedback from candidates are saying, hey, you've got certain hiring managers that aren't doing it. It's easy to dial up, drill in, see who the hiring managers are, talk to them, train them, get them on board. So these are instant wins that you get when you get this kind of visibility into things. And the quote out of this particular case study is, it's really helped them evolve recruiters towards a more account management based approach. as opposed to purely transactional. Another result, this client, to reduce misalignment between stakeholders, earlier in the recruitment process, the company revised what they call calibration forms, which are forms that they put together to kind of calibrate recruiter and hiring manager on what the objective is, who they're looking for, what the job, all that kind of stuff. And they started instituting service level agreements between recruiters and hiring managers, all right? See how this works? You kind of start to be able to grade that alignment through data and analytics and understanding what the interactions are like. And then you can kind of say, look, let's put service level agreements in there. So we're very upfront with what you can expect from us, and we're very upfront with what we can expect from you, and we can measure it with the data that we all know we're being evaluated on. Great alignment technique. And they also found out that their hiring managers really weren't as dialed into the resources that were available in recruiting from them. So they created a manager resources page to get all the information they needed to accomplish their task. Really cut down on their back and forth and communications, which was a problem that they were seeing between hiring managers and recruiters. The communication was dragging them down, trying to get answers to questions. And the quote out of that one is the simple fact that recruiters and hiring managers are giving and getting feedback on their performance has made an immediate impact. In other words, the very act of measuring really snaps things into alignment. Another client result, to monitor his hiring manager performance, we created a comparison widget on the Survale dashboard that compares hiring manager preparedness to candidate satisfaction. And the data is updated constantly as candidates move through the hiring process. So think about that. You can create a specific widget that says, here is hiring manager preparedness, and here's candidate satisfaction. And you can see the direct correlation between those. And when you have that kind of data, you can go to hiring managers and say, hey, when you're more prepared, our candidates are X% more satisfied. Do you see what impact you have? What tools do you need? How can we support you in being more prepared? That's training. That's more active management of that particular hiring manager. These are big wins that you really can guess about, or you can know. And gathering that feedback from both hiring managers and recruiters is a way to know rather than to guess. And the quote out of that is, I used to only hear about interview problems if they were very bad. Now hiring managers are getting regular feedback, and they know it's important to the success of the company that they be prepared and engaged in interviews. Well, I have another one here. I guess we have a little bit more time. Any issues found within recruiting interactions become discussion points for one-on-one meetings with recruiters. If hiring managers' issues are uncovered, the recruiting team shares Survale data with the hiring managers to educate them about the importance of their interview performance. Again, kind of along the lines of the last one, hiring managers now know that we're surveying these candidates and they're accountable for what is occurring in those interviews. That knowledge is very, very powerful. And we hear it time in and time out from clients that just the act of letting people know that candidates are giving us feedback on this and we're giving each other feedback really aligns those people around those common metrics and gets their attention that this is important. So that's it. We're at about 25 minutes, which is our time, but we definitely have time for questions. Jason, did you have any more any examples to throw in there?
I'm just afraid I'm going to steal the wind out of your sails again. So,
well, we're done. There's nothing more coming.
out of the next webinar. So no, all good. I thought that was really, really well done.
So feel free to ask us questions in the chat. We're here to answer for you. And until then, thank you. And thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you. And thanks, Kevin.